We will get the afternoon session started. First of all, it's fabulous to listen to young people do what they do. I will say this, the med student, Landon, he's a med student. He has already had 5 papers published as a med student, so just off the chart. 4th year student. Good Lord. Makes us wonder what we're doing ourselves, but that was impressive. That was fun to see. Impressive from this campus. Next up, we will have Chancellor Aguilar. And first of all, thank you for having us at your campus. Is this the end of 1 year you've been here?
15 months.
15 months already. I'll let you take over.
Well, first of all, on behalf of UMKC, its students, its faculty and staff, let me welcome the board here to our beautiful campus. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for your kind words about the role of urban universities. That's a role we play for this community. And also, thank you for your excellent choice in ties.
How do you do your roo?
All right, I got to teach this.
Okay,
I
yeah.
taught this at the Missouri 100. So put up your hand, middle 2 fingers on your thumb, middle 2. And if you look at it sideways, you see the roo, and you go roo up.
Well, wait, do that again. Do that again.
It's the last part.
Curator Steelman.
Roo up. Roo up.
Here.
Okay, I can do that.
Roo
Okay.
up.
You say roo up.
Roo up. Okay. All right.
Now, here's the interesting part. I didn't start this. This was already here. I just encourage people to do more of it to get some spirit going. So I must say that this semester and this academic year started with some special energy. When the students came back and the faculty and staff all came back, there was just such palpable energy here. And especially with the students. And yes, we did go through orientation and had a lot of fun doing the RU up and other things. But we have maintained our focus on student success. We're renewing and doubling down on a focus on student success. Over the last academic year, our provost and her excellent team have created this new plan for student success called RU Strong, and it's based on a culture of care. That means we will look at every decision we make from the point of view of the student, and we'll take care of the student as a member of our family from the day they apply to UMKC to the day they cross that stage at graduation. And it should be seamless. So we're doing a lot of things in terms of support services for our students, and to the extent that we are restructuring some of the provost office so that we'll have one person in charge of student success in a seamless fashion. And so we're looking for a national search for the vice provost for student success, which is currently underway. And this is not a new model. This is a model that has been used by some other institutions that we have been looking at who have moved the retention and graduation rates at a very rapid pace. We also realize that we are an urban university and that we cater to an urban core, and that not all students are quite prepared to come to UMKC. So we just recently signed an agreement with the Metropolitan Community College where students who may not be fully prepared for UMKC can now co-enroll at MCC and at UMKC, once again giving them a seamless path and an opportunity for success. We also have some good news. Through some of these efforts, we already are seeing some differences, and in our first year retention rates for students who came in last year and then renewed their tenure at UMKC this year, we saw a 3% increase this past year. So when we look at graduation rates, it is important to note that first you have to work on retention rates, because if you do not retain them, you will not graduate them. So you need to work really, really hard on retention rates, and that's what we're doing right now with good success. I'll jump over here. Marketing. This is something that we need to do more of, and we have already launched this program. We have realized that people don't quite know all the excellence that we have here at UMKC, and you saw some of that in the room next door with the students and our faculty there. We need to make sure that our community and the state and the country realizes that. So we launched a new marketing campaign in March of this year. UMKC rules are everywhere. You see that kangaroo sign, the road sign, those signs are all over the city. I get a lot of positive feedback on that. We're going to follow that up with a campaign that talks about the excellence everywhere that rules bring. We have targeted the metro area right now and then certain Kansas rate counties, and with two goals. One is to do more undergraduate recruitment, but also to raise the reputation of this campus. And I think we will be successful in that, but we do need much more on the marketing end. Research. For a public urban research university, the way I see it, there are three major missions. Knowledge preservation, that is taking care of the knowledge that has been handed to us by previous generations. Knowledge generation, new knowledge creation, and then knowledge dissemination, which is where the teaching and education part comes. All three are very important to us. And so on the knowledge creation piece, we have hired a new vice chancellor for research, Dr. Chris Liu, who just joined us a couple of months ago. Dr. Liu came to us from a California State School, where he had a similar position. And prior to that, he was an NSF program director, which makes a lot of sense for us because he understands how the funding agencies in Washington, D.C. work. We will support all our faculty in all the research and scholarship endeavors, but we have to be strategic moving forward in where we will invest the most, and those are areas of big data analytics. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. Biomedical research, all the things that are happening on Hospital Hill for us with the 4 schools there, and then defense and energy research, which is out of physics and School of Computing and Engineering. We have had some big wins in recent years, $18 million to Professor Caruso for Missouri Institute for Defense and Energy. He does a lot of work on drones and counter-drone work. Most of it is classified, so I cannot even tell you because I don't know. But he has a very large enterprise there. We did see a small increase in research expenditures over the prior year, but more importantly, what we are seeing to date now is in fiscal year 20, that we're getting more grants compared to the previous fiscal year. So that's a good leading indicator that we are making progress. What's exciting is the Next Gen Precision Health Initiative and our role in it. So we have decided that the biggest contribution we can make to the system-wide initiative is to focus on data science and analytics. The system, through its research grants, has agreed to invest money in this center, which will be at UMKC, and it will be a collaboration between UMKC and Mizzou. But we will serve the whole system for its data analytics needs. Now, a lot of that will be in the Precision Health Initiative because precision health translates to personalized medicine, which translates to data. And so we already have a lot of expertise here with folks like John Spertus and Jerry Wyckoff, who are doing work in this area. Just this morning, I had a very good meeting with Chancellor Cartwright and Mark McIntosh, Chris Liu, the Vice Chancellor, and we're trying to formulate this center so that it will be set up for success in the long run, and how it will serve not just our researchers and our students, but also industry partners, because we want Missouri to be the center of precision health and data analytics. From the UMKC side itself, we have launched a new institute for data education, analytics, and science. Makes for a nice acronym. And we will use the Next Gen Center, the services provided for our work. None of this work would be possible, and none of the good things would be there without faculty and staff and our students. And that's because without people, a university is just a collection of buildings and labs and computers. It's the people who bring it to life. And it's been a great year for recognition for our UMKC faculty. Give you a couple of examples. Conservatory's Chen Yi has been named as a fellow of the American Academy of the Arts and Letters. So what does that mean? Well, this academy is very exclusive. There are only 250 living members of this academy at any one point in time. It has been in existence since the late 1890s. To give you an example of some of the former members, well, not former members, I guess once you're a member, but members perhaps who were deceased, George Bernard Shaw, John Updike, Winston Churchill, and others. And now from UMKC, Chen Yi. SCE professor Yu-Ji Lee was honored with the STEMI Award, a national award for mentoring women in STEM. A theater program has been ranked in the top 25 by the Hollywood Reporter. And then, as you saw this morning, we have 5 faculty that have been honored as the Curators Distinguished Professors. So I thank the board for that. A lot of excellence there. And of course, the students, you saw Salem earlier in the other room in the Enactus piece. The Enactus is great because it brings together students across all disciplines. And you can just see the joy on the faces and the excitement that you can see. I also want to point out, we excel all across. So even for athletics, the average GPA for UMKC student athletes is 3.34, which is remarkable. Now, there are pockets in there, like the women's soccer team, which, by the way, won the conference at the national level last year. Their average GPA is 3.75. So these people go through the rigors of the athletic training and playing at the same time do really, really well in the classroom. You all met Lisa Baronio earlier. She is the new president of the UMKC Foundation. We have made a change this year where the president of the foundation is also a member of the UMKC administration, which was not true in the past. So she's also the chief advancement officer for UMKC and reports to the chancellor. And as you heard earlier, we were very fortunate in getting $40 million raised for new scholarships last year. And this year coming out of the gate, $15 million from the Sunderland Foundation, $21 million from the Block family once again. So excited about what the future holds. Diversity and inclusion remains a big focus for us, and it's a strength of ours, and we want to maintain that. So one of the new ideas that we're launching this year is to have these programs, panel discussions, lectures, discussion groups on civil discourse, on freedom of expression, and conflict management, so that our students can use these moments as teachable moments and be able to handle differences better. We did receive a national award, the 2019 HEAT Award, for institutions that make significant progress towards diversity and inclusion goals. And then for the staff has been asking us to get more staff development, and they made it clear that they were not talking about give us the next course on Microsoft Word or how to do Excel. They were talking about career development. And we realized that one of the things we don't do enough of is, as supervisors, we don't mentor our people enough. We evaluate them for the annual evaluation, but mentorship is different. And so we have embarked on this program called Talk It Up, which was first, all supervisors now have been trained on how to mentor the folks, and now we're going to implement this on a quarterly basis. There will be conversations between the employee and the supervisor, but with a positive mentoring in mind. So we're excited about that as well. And then athletics, we have hired a new athletic director this past year, Dr. Brandon Martin. I think he has met the board before. Just a word about Dr. Martin and his background. He was a basketball player at USC, the captain of the team there. After he graduated, he went pro. He played mostly overseas, came back to USC to get a PhD. His PhD dissertation was voted the best dissertation that year at USC. He went on into athletic administration, trained at Oklahoma under some of the best, went back to California, to California State School. We were able to get him back from there. He's doing a lot of good work, raising a lot of money for athletics, and at the same time decreasing the dependence on the general budget. We're rebranding ourselves, talking more about Kansas City. because there are folks on one side of the border who would like to claim Kansas City as their own, and we have said we're going to put a fence around Kansas City. This is our city, so UMKC is going to be branded as Kansas City. The other reason is, as we get more on TV, the commentators, and this is based on my previous experience, are going to confuse the Missouri with Mizzou. And that happened to me at my previous institution. And so we want to make sure that Mizzou stays Mizzou, and that's Missouri, and that we are Kansas City. We have hired a new men's basketball coach, Billy Donlan, who came to us from Michigan and then Northwestern, and he's making a lot of changes, so expect some good basketball starting this season. We have launched new student traditions, including the hand sign and the ouch of pouch, which is an area in the bleachers during basketball games. And just, did I say that we have more energy? That concludes my presentation. I'm open to questions.
Any questions? Very well done.
Thank you.
Very well. That was good. The pouch of ouch. Really good. Thank you very much. Well, we'll move on. Dr. Steve Graham, strategic theme discussions, how to improve teaching and learning. And I believe we were sent some information a week ago.
Yes, it was a pre-read article.
How much time do we have? Because I know we're running a little bit.
2 minutes and 45 seconds. No, just kidding. You have plenty. You have time.
Okay.
You're good.
Yeah. please
You're
come
good.
on.
We're doing well.
So. Oh, okay. Making some equipment adjustments here, I think. So anyway, the president has been focusing on teaching over the last couple of years, wanting to make sure that our faculty understand that despite our efforts to increase research funding and scholarship in our research-oriented universities, that we don't forget about teaching. And so he has challenged the provost on each of the campus to look at how we evaluate teaching, focus on teaching, look at how we reward teaching, and how we address it if there are issues. So about a year ago, and that was part of the pre-read, we took this issue. As you know, the provost worked very carefully and closely with IFC, which is the Intercampus Faculty Council, and IFC drafted a policy paper in order to try to address this and look at some of the new ways of doing it. So what we're going to do today is just kind of highlight a few of the basics to get started, and then each of the provosts will talk a little bit about what they do on their campuses and try to, so we have plans to move through this fairly quickly because I know that the curators really enjoyed the dialogue during this part of the board, and so I'm going to hold each of the provosts to 7 minutes, which will be trying for them, but I'm going to time them, so when the timer goes off, then they'll have to, so. Just to set the stage, a couple of common facts so that you don't hear it again and again. Obviously, we want to establish quality teaching. It creates that learning environment, student engagement, provides the challenges, engagement that you heard students talk about, and we want to make sure that we're fair and responding to the students' needs. One of the things that's really tricky, and it's gotten to be quite controversial lately, is the whole notion of student evaluations, or what I'm going to refer to as student ratings. There's been a lot of research that shows that they can be quite biased depending on the nature of the class, sometimes depending on the gender or ethnicity of the instructor, even on the time of day the class is offered. And particularly since we've gone to online format, which is a better way to collect the data in terms of efficiency, we don't get the response rates that we did. So if we don't get a full response, only a few of the students that weren't happy or whatever can respond, or maybe just the happy or the ones that aren't happy respond. So the caution there, and this has come out in the national media a lot through a lot of different studies, and you'll see them cited. We have over 50 studies cited in that paper that I shared. They're necessary but not sufficient. We need that kind of information about from students, but we need to do it in concert with other things. And so that's just the whole notion, is that we need to gather multiple sources of data. We need to do peer evaluations in the classroom, peer evaluations of the materials and syllabi. There are some fairly sophisticated ways to evaluate either students are engaged or active learning. And so really that's the focus what we're trying to move, and you'll hear the provost talk about that. We also need to recognize excellent teaching and make sure that it's embedded as part of our post-tenure review. I would say that we made a major change in the last couple of years. You may remember about a year or so ago, we made changes to the post-tenure review guidelines. And it used to be that in the past, if you did fairly well on research, but didn't do so well on teaching, you could still get an overall 5-year pass. We changed that so that now faculty are required to do well on both of those major efforts, both their teaching and their scholarship, in order to get an overall pass. So that's a significant shift. And once again, that was the faculty council working very closely with the provost. Those are just some general recommendations. I'm not going to go through them because I want to be sensitive to time, but we just need to make sure that faculty perceive that teaching is valued and is rewarded. We need to take a holistic approach to evaluating teaching, and we need to make sure that they have the tools that they need so that if they are struggling a little bit, that they get the help they need. Once again, I'm going to turn it over to our provost and ask that they touch base on things. They're going to talk, a lot of the things they do would be similar in nature, but they're going to try to highlight a couple of individual things, as you'll see, using multiple strategies, using a tool that we gather faculty data about, and just look at response rates, et cetera. And with that, I will turn it over to Provost Roberts.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before the board. Before I jump into actually what I've written down here, I do want to give one piece of opinion that has sort of developed in me over 30 years in higher education. My first appointment in higher education was exactly 30 years ago this semester as an undergraduate teaching assistant in human anatomy and physiology labs. And there's often a perception that quality of teaching that teaching and research, there exists a tension between them, that there's a trade-off between them, that it's often, frankly, a naive perspective that perhaps a faculty member is a very strong teacher, but not necessarily a strong researcher, and vice versa. I can tell you in those 30 years since that first academic appointment, the bit of tension that there is simply has to do with the time available for teaching and the time available for research and the time available for all of the other obligations of a faculty member. But what I have seen time and time again is a positive correlation between the quality of teaching and the quality of research. Faculty, almost to a person, are committed to mastering their craft as a teacher, just as they are committed to elevating the impact and visibility and reputation of their research programs, and in turn the entire university and institution. So with that said, I'll talk a little about how teaching is evaluated. And of course, student evaluations are an important tool. As Steve said, they are necessary but not sufficient. They provide both quantitative and qualitative feedback. There's another important type of feedback that we encourage faculty to retain and to break out at appropriate times, and that's unsolicited feedback. And you actually saw a perfect example of unsolicited feedback. When Annie was at lunch, Annie was talking about taking a course in which she memorized 50 lines of Beowulf. And she spoke to her faculty member, and her faculty member says, wow, you seem to have a particular passion, and you should take this graduate course in medieval literature. I would almost guarantee you that Annie wrote a letter, a very nice note to that teacher saying, thank you so much for recommending that course. That course that you recommended that I take altered the career, in fact, defined the trajectory of my career. And so thank you. That's a critical piece of information that I recommend all faculty members include. Yes, Curator Chapman.
We've got a lot of great teachers on all of our campuses throughout the system, fantastic teachers. But I want to know, student evaluations, what are the consequences of a teacher that consistently gets negative student evaluations?
We're going to get right to that, and you'll probably
Okay.
hear themes on those consequences, Curator Chapman, over and over, but each of us have an entire slide dedicated to that.
All right, thank
Okay,
you.
so I'll move on here. So, of course, when we look at a teaching evaluation, a teaching portfolio, we want to see diversity, not just the quantitative and qualitative results from student evaluations and unsolicited feedback. We want to see evidence that they have been attending campus or national workshops on improving their teaching craft. We want to see if they've received awards for teaching excellence from either student groups or alumni groups or campus colleagues or the system or the president. We want to see some evidence, or we'd like to see some evidence of peer evaluation of teaching. We will be delighted if the faculty member has written and obtained external grants to improve teaching effectiveness or the teaching infrastructure or environment. And we always welcome faculty who use their classrooms as laboratories and ultimately publish research on teaching effectiveness from that approach. We are, again, always thinking about the tools to improve the evaluation of teaching, and the student evaluation tool itself is always subject to modification and improvement. One thing on the S&T campus, and I'm sure on many other campuses that's done, is more regular feedback between the students and the faculty member. And what has become quite popular is sort of a halftime check-in, mid-semester check-in with faculty and students, where the faculty member reaches out to the students and say, what do you think so far? Well, we're thinking of taking that actually to the next level of organization, and that is to use and adopt a predictive analytics platform that allows students to provide feedback to instructors in real time, lecture by lecture, laboratory by laboratory, saying, well, this seemed to work and this didn't seem to work, and allow faculty members to adapt in real time to observations and criticisms and feedback from students. In the evaluation of teaching, we want to normalize peer evaluation. We want to normalize the inclusion of unsolicited feedback that I described. And of course, we want students and faculty leaders together to work towards establishing guidelines and standards for teaching effectiveness. So, Curator Chapman, to get to your question, here are the actions that we take related to teaching performance when they're below expectations and above expectations. If they're below expectations and we are seeing this relatively early, we avail the individual or the faculty member to campus and other resources for improving teaching effectiveness, and I'll describe those in a little bit. If we begin to see patterns of ineffectiveness, then we provide, or the faculty member realizes negative outcomes in merit raises, in annual performance evaluations, third-year review, which happens at halftime during the probationary period prior to tenure and promotion, in the promotion and tenure decision itself, and the 5-year post-tenure review. And ultimately, long-term, consistent, systemic below-par performance in teaching can yield dismissal for cause. For those that perform above expectations, of course, as I described, there's conferral of awards and special recognitions and titles such as Curator's Distinguished Teaching Professor, and of course, positive outcomes in merit raises, annual performance review, third-year review, promotion and tenure, and the 5-year post-tenure review. And all of these processes are very well defined. A little bit about the catalog of resources at the S&T campus for improving teaching effectiveness. We have something called the Center for Advancing Faculty Excellence, or CAFE, and we provide, as you see here, I won't go through them all, but a variety of resources to faculty members to improve their craft as teachers. And of course, such resources are not available only on campus, but nationally through their professional societies and organizations. So, thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And I think earlier Cameron said you have to hear something 8 times for it to stick. I think you're going to hear it 4 times from us because it's primarily a repetition of the same point. I want to start with what Steve said about research and teaching Not only is it absolutely true that good researchers tend also to be good teachers. I mean, people who do work well and come to academia for the right reasons excel in all dimensions, no question. It is also true that relative to what it was 25 years ago, at least at some institutions, for instance, when I graduated with my PhD, which was 25 million years ago, we were actively told, we were not taught how to teach. You were taught how to do research, and it was assumed that you would go into the classroom and you knew how to teach. This was, the implicit understanding at some of the top tier institutions. It is not so today. It is not so today, even at these institutions. In fact, for that reason, the statement from the AAU president emphasizes why we cannot put up with bad teaching. We cannot condone poor teaching, and it must be viewed as irresponsible, an abrogation of our not fulfilling our collective mission. And we need to make sure that our students have the opportunity to succeed. So the fact that research and teaching are both equally important, that they're not mutually exclusive, is now sort of embedded into every institution, AAU or not. What do we do about teaching? What is good teaching? And how do we measure that? Several measures, and Steve alluded to several of those, both the Steves actually, Steve squared. Teaching evaluations, yes. In fact, some of our schools, and I actually asked every dean to send me a list of what they're doing on these dimensions. Some schools actually have a lower bound that they require for all their faculty. Your teaching score, if it falls below a certain value, then you are counseled, you are put under a development plan, and it has implications. And I'll get to that in a minute. Student comments, it's not just the numerical score, it's what are the students saying about what you do in the classroom. Peer reviews, not just of someone coming to your classroom and seeing how you teach, but also peer reviews of your syllabi. Is your content relevant? Is it rigorous? Is it going to ensure that those students are going to get a job when they graduate? You can be an amazing teacher and yet not do these things. So peer reviews are becoming more important. In some cases, like for instance, I know in business and engineering, accreditation requirements are such that you have to explain to the accrediting body how you are updating your curriculum, how you are dealing with bad teaching, what exactly does your teaching do in terms of career outcomes, and this is measured in many ways. For instance, let me highlight that program rankings, for instance. There are rankings where the ranking is based not just on how you do today in the class, but what does your student look like 5 years after they graduate? Has your teaching made an impact on their career? Alumni surveys. PayScale is a database that you can actually pull up data on salaries post-graduation. So institutions are being evaluated on that. And frankly, all this ties into that classroom experience. We certainly have a lot of, we certainly are investing significantly in this teaching enterprise. And what I mean by that is the embracing of teaching, not just as teaching to students, but teaching just as we do research, teaching as a learning tool, teaching as a research tool. The amount of investments happening on our campus is significant in that domain. And of course, the other side of that, which is when you are a good teacher, you need to make sure that your teaching, your secret sauce is shared with those that are not. So the awards, several awards, but also getting that group of faculty to share what they're doing that is best practice out there with those that might benefit from that, especially early career teachers, junior faculty. There is a task force just recently created that's actually going to come up with on the MU campus. It's all these measures are being used. Teaching evaluations, absolutely. And the good thing this year has been that relative to what happened in the past, this year, and I'm told this is the first time, we have 100% adoption of the MyVita tool, which is how we gather collectively this information on teaching, so that when it comes time for a faculty member to be evaluated, that's all in one platform, in one place. And that didn't happen before. And that is happening right now. So a task force is actually looking at how can we put all this together, come up with a comprehensive way to address teaching effectiveness, and do it more or less in a standard format across all colleges. What happens if if your teaching evaluation falls below a certain score? Several things there. You're put under a development plan, you're given a faculty coach or a mentor, your merit raise is definitely impacted. That is absolutely happening. In promotion and tenure, if you look at our standards, almost every college has teaching embedded in those standards. The question is it being enforced? And what we're seeing now is you can be a bad teacher perhaps in your first semester. The consistency of that bad teaching is what we are worried about. So if you have a low teaching score, you better not move forward with that same score. Let's make sure we help you get there. And in looking at the data from FY fall 16 through spring 19, I can tell you I haven't seen evidence of that. I saw some cases where the teaching score is low to begin with, but 2 semesters after that, it goes up. And that tells me something is working well. Are we there yet? Perhaps not. Post-tenure guidelines, like Steve mentioned, have taken this into account very seriously. Also, non-renewal of contracts for NTT faculty. One other thing that I wanted to share, and I will stop. And you need to give me some extra time because you gave Steve extra time. So I just want to read this letter to you, okay? Dear, this was sent to a faculty member. Dear XXX, this message is a bit overdue. I wanted to reach out and thank you for all you have done. For Courtney, who is a student, the knowledge and experience she has learned from you has been invaluable and will stay with her for a long time. As we both know, life isn't always easy or fair, but hard work and perseverance are important. We all need different levels of encouragement and a kick in the pants, and you identified that perfect balance with Courtney. Kudos to you for recognizing her talent and playing such a significant role. As her dad, this came from a dad, it is difficult to put into words how grateful I am that you have been such an incredible influence on her. And I bring this up because this is a very different role for us as instructors. This is more than just teaching. It is being mentors, it's being life coaches to these students. And that really is what, to me, good teaching should be about. Yes?
Provost, thank you for that. Thank you for that report. What can we do? This is an open-ended question. What can we do as a board and as administrators to incentivize good teaching on campus? You know, I know we can look at the negatives and how we're going to punish people, but how can we incentivize that? Is there something that we can do at this level to help you in this process?
That's a great question. It's always great to have that support to go back and say, we're all in this together. We embrace. I go back to, we want our students to graduate and do well. That's really the goal here. And what that means is if we can all agree to, you're walking on campus and you see a student who doesn't look too well or whatever. Let's reach out to that student and say, tell me what's happening. How can I help? That's more than a teaching rating. If I can get even 50% of our campus to agree to that, and I think we'll get there, we just haven't asked them to do that. If you're on campus, if you speak to a faculty and you ask them about how their teaching goes, I think if we all share that message of caring that Chancellor Agrawal talked about, that we're talking about all the time on our campus, Chancellor Cartwright and all of us, if we can embrace that message that, we're so fortunate in academia. I always say, my kids don't listen to me, and yet I have 40 students in a class who've paid to come there to listen to me. What is my responsibility? I have a responsibility to make sure those students do well. And if we can embrace that message, all of us, I think that'll just be so unique. So if just even knowing that you care about this means a lot.
And financial incentives, let's talk about that.
Yes.
I agree. Saying great things about our faculty is very, very positive, and I will always brag on our faculty. But do we need financial incentives to reinforce our commitment?
It never hurts. Although I'm just going to say that this is, there are people who will buy into this, whether or not you give them a financial reward. The joy of making a difference in a student's life and knowing that it matters is just. It's hard for me to explain that. And so it's nice to have more awards, and we certainly need that. We don't have as many awards as, say, some of the AAU institutions do. But I also think we need to do more in terms of telling people not just how important it is for the student, but how good it feels when you can help reach out and help another human being. So we certainly can talk about the financial rewards, and you bet that I'll come after this and talk to you about how we can make that happen. But I think just sharing the message that we care will make a big difference. So anyway, so strong teaching evaluations are necessary. And that's my quote at the end, which is the students don't really care how much you know unless they know you care about them. And that's what all this is about. So thank you.
If I could
Yeah.
ask one question. How do you handle the evaluations of online? Is it done the same?
It's done the same way.
And are you aware, do you track whether they're better online or students very successful?
We have done that. There was a study in 17 which actually did that, and it's a good study. It's one data point. We need to do more on that. Right now, it's all clubbed together, and so if you're asking, does it matter whether it's online or not? Probably not as much as I would have thought. There's not that many differences, but correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't seen big differences, Steve, between online and face to face. Right, exactly.
I'm sorry, what?
And
Thank
one
you.
more, I'm sorry, one more question. Provost, you did say that we lag behind other AA institutions in awards that we give our faculty. How far do we lag behind? Are we, is there a multiplier of 2 or 3? I mean, how far behind are we compared to some of our other comparable institutions? In the AA?
I could be wrong on this, but so the way I think about what happens at the in Columbia is we have the Kemper Awards and we have the Curators Distinguished Teaching Awards. Those, and then we have the Anne Covington Awards. Those are 3 groups that I think of. I think the like if you look at, and I'm looking at Chancellor Cartwright, other institutions like say SUNY, or if you look, for instance, at Purdue or Indiana, the range of awards given to faculty from early career faculty to late career faculty, and the support we give in terms, so do we have endowed teaching professors? The number of them that we have on campus is not as high. I don't have a specific number, but I don't think I'm wrong. Is that-
The only thing I would add is it's where we're behind is really in the number of awards we receive external to the institution from outside entities, the recognition from outside entities about the excellence of our faculty. And that's a lot of how you nominate, how you get people the awards from external groups.
Working on improving that?
Of course we are.
Okay, great.
Good afternoon. At UMKC, we have the benefit of following and saying similar messages as our colleagues at S&T and at Mizzou. So I'm going to speed through a little bit the first couple of slides. So in doing work on teaching effectiveness and identifying and defining what teaching effectiveness is, we have quantitative measures, we have qualitative measures, we have peer evaluations of teaching. We have a number of professional schools where how teaching evaluation occurs is dictated by specialized accreditors such as our medical school and our dental school and our law school. So that's why it says most units have requirements. Those units that don't necessarily follow our campus procedures are actually following their specialized accreditation procedures. The one thing I want to note about UMKC is not only do we actually go about identifying and defining teaching effectiveness through student evaluations of teaching and peer evaluations of teaching, we also actually have definitions of how to assess teaching generally, and we have assessment awards and evaluations as well. So not only do we evaluate teaching, but we evaluate the evaluation of teaching, just to make sure that we have rigorous and valid and reliable processes there. So when it comes time to improving our evaluations of teaching, I do want to mention, as Steve pointed out, there are many challenges with student evaluations of teaching alone. We take those seriously. Not only do we try to have multiple measures, but we're trying to figure out what a better student evaluation of teaching is. One of the challenges why student evaluations of teaching are not necessarily great predictors of great teaching is because they don't measure engagement. For example, there are a lot of questions that just boil down to, I like the teacher, the class is at a good time of day for me, many other extrinsic variables to the actual teaching and learning enterprise. There is research done around performance-based teaching based on qualities that we know make a good educational experience. So we're looking at how do we improve our student evaluations teaching based on those data. There are also metrics that are value added, and I'll come back and talk about that in a minute. So we're doing quite a bit to try to think about what is the best student evaluation of teaching that we can have, what's a baseline we need on our campus, and then how do we tie those with those other multiple measures. When someone does have a teaching evaluation that's below expectation, we try to be very developmental. Again, as Letta pointed out, people don't come to higher education with a terminal degree having had a lot of training and teaching unless they came from a school of education generally. They have expertise in research and they have expertise in their disciplinary knowledge. So there's a lot of developmental work that we can do. We do that starting with our new faculty orientation, and we do that throughout the year. And of course, System provides great resources for us in terms of faculty development as well. So if they're below expectations, they have a meeting with their department chair. They have a requirement for peer observation and evaluation. And for non-tenure track faculty, there's possible non-renewal, and there's development plans for tenure track faculty that give them some period of time to improve, but then it can move into a standard of faculty conduct matter, or as Steve pointed out, a dismissal for cause. And we have had those on our campus for people who have year over year poor teaching. And if they're above expectations, we try to celebrate that and promote that. And Curator Chapman, anything that we can do that emphasizes that at the curators level, again, I do think there's the recognition. But I also think the more curators faculty or curators teaching professorships we can have, the more endowed professorships we can have in general, the more we can elevate pay, recommendations for merit pay. That does show a sign of what we're doing. And then I'll come back in a minute. We try to take those stories and highlight them on U Matters and our UMKC homepage, and I'll show you some examples of that in a moment. We're doing quite a bit to provide opportunities, again, that are developmental. I've spoken about those a little bit, so I won't belabor that slide. And I'll come to this story, and this ties in with what you saw over lunch. Behind every great student is a great teacher. One thing that I want you to understand about UMKC is a number that demonstrates the idea of value-added teaching and learning. In our strategic plan, we talk about the fact that we see UMKC as becoming a new kind of university that is focused on human capital development, meaning we teach, we research, and we serve, but we do it so that people are better, stronger, more capable people. And that in order to reflect that and model that, we have to be a community of learners. So our faculty have to be championing learning. There's two things that higher education does. We add value by teaching, and we actually certify by holding a standard. And those are two functions where you can err on one side or another. You can be too committed to gatekeeping and let people fall through the cracks. You can be very committed to learning, but forget exactly what the standard is you're upholding. That idea of value added is particularly important at a university like UMKC, where we have an access mission as well as an expectation that we're going to hit a standard. 70% of students at UMKC, 70% of students at UMKC meet some kind of factor or multiple factors that are either high need or also underserved minority. So that includes first generation college going students, that includes Pell eligible students, that includes underserved minorities, and they come in with greater need. So we talk a lot about building a better bridge at UMKC, holding a quality standard while bringing students along and providing the supports for that. We have lots of great examples of that, but to the challenge of our retention rates, that's about getting those standards to scale and starting by having a culture of care. The faculty who are behind the students whose stories you heard just a little bit, I want to give you a flavor of that idea of where our students come from and value added, so that we have not only an input where we're stretching, but an output that is competitive. Our law school bar passage rate is just about the same, a couple of percentage points different than MU or KU. Our medical school passage rate for students into residency is among some of the most competitive in the country. You can go through pretty much unit by unit and see that generally we have very solid outputs while bringing our students a lot more along. These pictures are a series that Ann Spencer's shop did around dynamic duos, and you actually heard from a couple students who are tied to some of these faculty, but I want to read you a story or two. Over on the right side, the middle picture is Maciano Viotalo and Jordan Fianciello. I'm sure I did not do that right. Here's a little bit of a bio about Jordan. Jordan came to UMKC as a transfer with 2 demoralizing college experiences behind her. First generation college student, she commuted 30 minutes from home at Lee Summit and worked to pay for costs not covered by scholarships. She was beginning to think that higher ed was beyond her capabilities until our history professor in a night class told her that she could do whatever she needed to do and that she had a skill for history. Her quote is, "After every test I turned in, after every paper I wrote, he would tell me, 'You're really good at history. Have you ever thought about being a historian? Because you have some serious potential in this.'" Won't read more, but she's gone on to do great work, and she's found a future that she never would have had otherwise. Our faculty are at UMKC because they value each and every one of our students, and they put in extra time and beyond. And the vast majority of our faculty do that kind of work. Our challenge is to be able to do it at scale. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I wanted to get back to a couple of questions. I know that Curator Chapman had talked about what kind of rewards we could provide for teaching. And I just wanted to remind everybody that as a part of the merit raise, teaching is a part of that. And so their compensation every year, as we increase compensation or not, is dependent on teaching to be a big part of that. One of the things at University of Missouri St. Louis is our teaching evaluations. The percentage of students that were actually filling them out were lower than what we needed to be able to really evaluate that. And getting back to what one of the things that Curator Steelman had said about online teaching, we have evaluated our online teachers and our face-to-face teachers, and they have basically the same types of evaluations, but it's the actual evaluation itself, whether it was submitted online or the old paper format. When we transitioned from the paper format to the online format, the actual number of evaluations that were submitted by students really decreased. It plummeted because they would take it away later. And so we needed to, while we had our online format, increase that back up to the percentage that would make sense for us. And so we've focused over the last 2 years to really increasing the validity and having the increasing reporting of the teaching evaluations. And so we've increased that by 20% by working with our faculty senate and also with our student government association and making sure we understand the importance of that. So one of the things I want to talk about that's happening at in St. Louis is the curricular alignment process, which has helped not only with our faculty teaching, but also with our student success. The curricular alignment process is all about analyzing each degree program that we have to make sure that each program has very clear student learning outcomes, and all the courses in that degree program then map to those student learning outcomes. And if the courses don't map to that, then they're not on the books. We're not offering them anymore. And so what that does for student success is it creates a very clear pathway to degree completion. Students complete their degrees quicker, and they do it with less debt. And that's been illustrative of student success. But one of the things, we started that for student success, but it really illustrated that it really helped us with our faculty teaching as well, because we were able to then evaluate the courses that had high D, F, and withdrawal rates. And if those were courses that we still wanted on the books, sometimes we didn't, but if we wanted them on the books, then that course and that faculty member would work one-on-one with our Center for Teaching and Learning to revise that entire course and sequence collectively together, align it to the student learning outcomes to get the success parameters that we wanted. And that has really helped us overall in general. So as we hone our degrees, making sure that they're very clearly established, our 4-year and our 6-year plans for graduation, we have removed courses that are not successful for our students and don't map to those student learning outcomes. And then we also work really closely with our Center for Teaching and Learning for high quality programs, for high quality courses and then for programs. Now, what that does as well is, of course, creates that pathway, but it's also good, I guess I would say, for the bottom line, the financial bottom line, in the sense that we have less courses on the books that students can meander around or get caught up in. And that helps then in that situation as well. And in fact, one of the areas that we're really focusing now is the whole foundational math sequence, which was really illustrative through this process that we need to revise. And so the whole foundational math group is working one-on-one with our Center for Teaching Learning crew to revise everything. Now, in addition to student learning outcomes and of course having evaluations by their peers, we also take a look at NSSE, which is the National Survey of Student Engagement that's given to students when they are first year as well as at graduation. And analyzing what we see at UMSL is that our mentor peers, which are the urban and metropolitan peers, UMKC would be in that category as well as our Carnegie classification peers. This is another way that we analyze our student and faculty success, is what is illustrative of UMSL compared to our peers. And you can see on many of the teaching parameters we're above our particular peers, and we've had improvements from 18 to 19, particularly because of that one-on-one engagement with our Center for Teaching and Learning. And here's some other parameters as well with regards to excellent teaching. So we pay attention not only to the student evaluations of teaching, the peer evaluations of teaching, the annual reviews, but also the national surveys that go out to all of our students. And here's some comments. Of course, we like to see the positive comments come through in our NSSE surveys as well. And I'm going to stop there with summary comments and discussion, although I think they opened up some things, identifying teaching. So here, getting back to some of the areas that we use for evaluations of teaching, we have a self-reflection on the Sept, which is the student evaluations of teaching. We have CTL programs like On 9 and 9, DIY with the guide, and also one-on-one tutoring through CTL. We have classroom observations to analyze teaching. We have student interviews. So particularly in the areas that were identified in our curricular alignment process that needed help, we also go and interview students one-on-one in those sections to find out what their analysis is. And it's important to get timely feedback. So I'll leave that open for questions. All right, I have one more. No.
So, hey, Steve, I have a question for any of the provosts, and I think I saw it maybe in Provost Ramchand's about mentorship. Do we use any retired professors, like that are great professors that retire, and after about 6 months of retirement, they probably would love to be a great mentor to young faculty? Do we do that on any campus?
At Missouri S&T, we have a program through CAFE called Master Mentors. And I believe there are roughly, that team is about a dozen
Good.
very established faculty members with an exceptional reputation, sterling reputations in teaching. And several of them are emeritus status, including Professor Larry Gregg, who is Curator's Distinguished Teaching Professor.
And do we all do, I know Mizzou was on here, do we all do alumni surveys? Because I was thinking, I know I would be a better evaluator of my professors, not from age 18 to 22, because I probably wasn't understandable as much as from 25 to 35 or beyond, to where I'm thinking back on, that professor was really good and I didn't appreciate it, or all I was doing was trying to get through. So is it hard to survey alumni, or is it?
Please use.
I struggled with this as a business school dean because our rankings were dependent exclusively on that. The challenge is finding alumni, and how do you contact? But we have services now that will track alumni. You pay for it, and they'll let your alumni participate in the survey. They're not influencing what they say, but they allow you to stay in contact. The thing about those surveys is it's not done across the board. It is done only in programs that require it for accreditation or for rankings. I would love to see it done across, like US News rankings doesn't have that component, right? So it would be nice to see that.
Do any other of the universities get a chance to do it, or is it something you somehow send to alumni, whatever alumni piece of mail I get? It could easily have something in there about, do you have anything about your business school professors you want to add? I don't know what I'm saying, except I just think people who have left have a better understanding than when you're a current student.
At Curator Sumvold, I think that that's a fantastic idea, and we see that a lot qualitatively, but we haven't done anything quantitatively like the Nessie surveys that you just saw, some of that, and I think that would be a great addition.
The only other point I'd add to that is that basically, and Ryan could probably speak to this more, our IR people on each campus, as part of the performance metrics for the state of Missouri, there's actually a career outcome metric where we have to do some analysis and capture information about our alums and know where they went. And I think that's on like a 3-month or 6-month basis after they leave. So we do have that. It's the retaining of them over time. So when we're reaching out to find out where they are, we are trying to capture some information about them.
Great.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
thoughts,
I have a
ideas?
question. It's, Barb, you said it, we're trying to create a new kind of university. And the question I have, and it involves a lot of guesswork, and the surveys may answer part of it, but we are all the leaders here. I mean, this room is full of leaders. But but we're talking about a change in culture, a significant change in culture. And if a number of the people who teach freshman English were in this room, or quantitative whatever at S&T, if these people who are actually doing the teaching were in this room, what would they tell us? Would they say that they recognize this change, that they're on board with it? I mean, are we seeing that the people who have to make teaching matters work, are they providing buy-in to all of this? And is it really happening out there to the point that we can recognize it?
I can only speak for UMKC, but I would say absolutely. You do see it in our strategic plan. You do see in this idea of a culture of care. And the truth is, I think our faculty may have possibly been slow to respond to that, but there's a point in time when you realize there's no cavalry coming out there, right? State appropriations aren't coming back. They understand that. It's a highly competitive environment in the Kansas City area. Students vote with their feet. Fundamentally, faculty change because students require them to change. And students require them to change to be, I think the Hayden from EY Parthenon said it pretty well today. Students are expecting a level of personalization, and technology is available to allow for a level of personalization. That means faculty see they have to do something different, particularly when you have our kind of student demographic there. So I would say absolutely at UMKC. I know every campus has a little bit different culture with regards to that, but these are our conversations pretty much every day, and they're hungry. And I guess I'd point out something that both Steve and Letta said, and I think Kristen alluded to and Steve alluded to. There's not a dichotomy between research and teaching. In fact, what we talk about, and it again is in our strategic plan, research is how we learn. Faculty, in fact, Chris Liu, our new VCR, just identified the other day, the definition is research is any curiosity-infused activity. So we talk about with our faculty and our students that we want to deliver research-infused instruction, which is highly engaging. If research is how faculty learn, they need to model that for students, and they need to capture students there. The question is, what technologies do we use to do that, and how far do we reach in? And to Curator Steelman's, again, excellent point, bringing these all things together, you cannot teach or learn without it being a highly engaging experience. So the challenge, online doesn't necessarily stop you from engaging, nor does on campus. It's just we have to think differently than that idea about a great lecture. So our faculty are starting to understand they have to go get our students where they are and bring them along, and a good lecture isn't going to do it because they can get it on YouTube.
Sort of related to that, we have these undergraduate research programs that students like to be engaged in. Faculty are not given credit for that, as you know, it's not part of their load. But the number of faculty signing up to do that, getting excited about that, and introducing their undergraduates as really this is the outcome of the research is definitely going up. So there is a culture change.
So that represents a change.
Absolutely. And it's not just, I mean, this is across the nation, so.
If I can say something, Barb, you made a great point that I'm continually reminded of. Some people.
Curator Steelman, can you use the microphone?
Yeah. I was saying you made a great point. I'm on it, Phil. You gave it back to me. You tried to keep it from me, which is that today there are institutions like MIT and Harvard which put entire courses on YouTube. And so the idea that a teacher can simply record a lecture and then grade a test is beyond us. So I want to tell you, I appreciate very much the point you made, because we are competing with these massive online free courses. And if our teachers don't engage, then why would they pay us for those courses?
Exactly. And the only thing I would add to that point is it's what we tell our faculty, particularly those who are afraid of online and what that means. We use MIT as the model and simply say, look, if the magic were in your syllabus, then MIT just gave away the entire store when they posted all their syllabi online. It is the interaction, the engagement, and it's that passion that catches students and the ability to assess. I will tell you one quick anecdote. I was on a panel at the Aspen Institute once with Daphne Kohler. And if you know Daphne Kohler, she was one of the founders of Coursera, coming out of Silicon Valley. And she was telling a great story about how excited she was with a MOOC, and how, and as you know, MOOCs are massive online open courses. And there's a MOOC that had about 5,000 students enrolled in it. And it's, again, presentation of material. And the story she was telling about the excitement related to that was that in Prague, a group of these students who were taking this MOOC got together in a coffee shop to start to talk about what they were learning. And another panelist very cheekily said, yes, and that's what we call a university. So that we're starting to understand that a lecture was never good instruction. And that, I think, is what exciting is about new technologies. They're forcing us to understand that it's the engagement that matters.
Right. So I appreciate all the hard work from Steve Graham and the four provosts. They took this matter very seriously ever since they joined the university, but obviously we have some room to grow. When we do student evaluation of teaching, typically they range from a score of 1, which is a low score, to 5. Now, we know that there's evidence that suggests that there's gender, race bias, and other biases that go in. But we're not asking the provosts or the chancellors to evaluate the difference between a 3.7 and a 3.9. You know, and I know, excellent teaching based on those scores and the comments, and poor teaching. I'm talking about scores that are in the 1s, 1.5s. Have you seen a situation where the scores in the SCTs were so different from other measures of teaching, like peer evaluation of teaching? Or does the poor teaching, consistent poor teaching on SCT, indicate that other evaluations also show poor teaching?
When student evaluative scores are as low as you describe, those are usually pretty good predictors of performance-related measures in other areas of teaching.
Great.
So they're reasonably good predictors of profoundly low performance.
Sure. And we want to provide the faculty members with the input so that they can improve, because I'm sure no one comes to the universities to thinking that I'm just going to be a lousy professor, right? They want to be a good teacher. But if you see consistently low SCT scores that are followed up by peer evaluation that also indicates poor teaching, would you tenure that professor even if that professor had award-winning research?
It's impossible to tenure that professor, to be perfectly honest. There are standards that prevent that, and there are well-defined processes
Great.
that begin at the department level. Every department typically identifies its standards of teaching effectiveness across a variety of measures. One of my colleagues noted that what we often see and what we want to see, to be perfectly honest, is an increase, right? A continuous improvement in teaching and measures and outcomes of teaching effectiveness. That's what we want to see. I was mentioning to Steve Graham as we were sitting down, we were talking about young faculty members who just start. My advice to young faculty members every time in their first classroom, I remember mine. I remember the room, it was 312 students at UNLV. My first day as a junior faculty member, and I was petrified. And someone had told me, just survive it. Your first time, it's going to be bumpy and rocky, and not everything is going to be a pedagogical masterpiece. But you're going to get better and better and better throughout the semester, and students are going to give you great feedback. That's all we want, is continuous improvement.
Sure, please. Can you?
Poor teaching can be picked up right at the end of the semester through the SET. Poor research, we give them more time.
That's
we
true.
say, take one more year because research is lumpy and bumpy.
Right.
It's not linear. So frankly, the probability that someone comes up for tenure with a bad research record is higher than someone coming up for tenure with a poor teaching record because it's easier to fix that.
That's true.
Right? So
That's true.
yeah.
So what you're saying is that they may not get reappointed year by
Correct.
year.
Correct.
Okay.
Or they will be put on, again, like I
Sure.
said, I looked at all the scores. I haven't seen consistently bad teaching,
That's
which is
great.
encouraging.
So one last question, if I can ask this question, and that is to set the foundation for expecting our new faculty that we hire to take teaching very seriously, even from the first semester, to let them know that typically the first semester is the most rocky semester, but to prepare them for it. But when we hire faculty, we ask the faculty candidates to come in and do a job shop talk, only talking about their research. Their teaching statement is provided, but we never ask them to give a job shop talk on teaching. And I think if we were to require that for all new faculty candidates coming in, we're setting the expectation that teaching and research at our universities are not exclusive, that they are really expected to work together.
Absolutely. To some extent, though, when they give that talk and the way they respond to the questions
Sure.
gives you an indication of how they'll perform in the classroom, right? So
Right, but we've hired many
Yeah.
faculty members through that process, and
Right.
yet we do have faculty members who do very poorly on the SETs. So the more emphasis that we can put on the job shop talk specifically, even given a mini lecture of a topic in a course, I think can be helpful.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes. Oh, I'm looking.
Go ahead.
I was thinking we could also learn from some other institutions, and all faculty, as was suggested earlier, need development when they come out and join an institution, both for research and teaching. And for instance, my former institution, when we hired fresh faculty, not senior faculty, we put it in their contract that in the first year they'll have to attend at least 3 teaching seminars that we would provide out of a selection of maybe 10, and at least 3 research seminars, and that there will be consequences if they did not fulfill that. And that was on the original letter. So there are ways to enforce it, so to make sure that everything is systematic and across the board.
So I really appreciate the emphasis that's being put on teaching, and I really appreciate the presentation and how each campus is looking at it, and it all makes a great deal of sense. It is really an important aspect, obviously, of our mission for the state and its citizens. My question as a board member is, when can you have some metrics that you can share with us regarding how you are measuring the quality of teaching and how we're addressing it so that we can trend it and note how we're improving it. Because this is I can tell that this is in a little bit of an earlier stage, and I'm not trying to rush the good work by any means, but it's hard to I think for us to evaluate improvement without maybe some sort of metric.
Yeah, Curator Bernstein, I think that's a good question, but with regards to, again, the annual evaluations and the post-tenure evaluations that we have for all of our faculty, teaching is a part of that, and that's a metric number, and so we have a particular number on that, and then it would just be a matter of putting that all together to analyze those trends. So we have that not only qualitatively in the annual reviews, but then quantitatively as well.
Anything else? Thank you to all the provosts. Steve, thank you. This was really good. Last thing before we are done is, does anybody have anything for the good and welfare of the board? Hearing none, we will move to executive session. President Choi and I will go do a quick press conference. Meet in about 15 minutes.